Hello. Hi, Robert.
Hi,
How's it going?
very good. Thanks, and you?
Very good. Very excited for today. We have over 615 people sign up for this event. We will try to do our best to make sure people stay awake over the next 30 to 45 minutes. Just to start things off, my name is Henrik. Thanks to everyone that has tuned in for this episode. I'm one of the hosts of Behind the Future. And today we're going to talk about how to use enterprise architecture to align strategy and execution. So it's a long and fancy title, but we know that this is something that a lot of kind of CIOs, executives, enterprise architecture teams have often been struggling with as well. And I think this is a big focus today and going forward. And I know I'm very happy and fortunate to sit down with the legend himself, Robert, for the next 35 minutes. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, actually.
Yeah, you're excited as well. This is a topic that is quite interesting, right? I know you have a lot of experience with enterprise architecture, both in the technical domains, but then now more strategic as well. Leading up the strategy architecture transformation and working in Deloitte. So, how does this resonate with you?
Yeah, actually, I've not done a format like this before, so this is it's first time. I've been on stage already and shared my experiences, and yeah, what we and I personally see in the industry is yeah, questions like these. So how to establish a strategic alignment and how to leverage the potentials of EA methods and EA toolings, yeah, to align strategies and to execute these. And yeah, basically that's daily work, either on the solution perspective, when we have modernization initiatives, or on the other hand, to raise the value of EA capabilities at customers.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of very interested in this topic as well because for the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of organizations that, both have had kind of an enterprise architecture practice. And for the ones that I've seen previous episodes of Behind the Future as well, they know that I talk a lot about this. But I think, we meet organizations that are very mature in kind of in terms of an EA practice. They have a lot of architects in-house. But then we also meet a lot of organizations that are just starting out, right? We see more and more executives that are kind of talking about why it's so important to have a proper kind of governance practice, but then also the way that they understand impact of change. They might not use the word enterprise architecture, but more and more kind of executives are using the approaches to this, right? So
Yeah.
we will get to all of those exciting parts today, but kind of to kick things off, I know that you started on the kind of different end of enterprise architecture. You started with kind of hardware, infrastructure, hard coding things yourself. So kind of how did this journey start for you?
Yes, you're right. It actually started in the early 2000s, and that's probably more than half of my life already since I'm 38. So I've been in IT quite a long time, and I started actually with yeah, digital large-scale copy machines, printing machines, installing company networks, corporate networks, yeah, implementing data center infrastructures, planning applications, and yeah, developing myself. So I've done the whole range of IT and different architectures so far, and
Mhm.
developed myself through different roles, from basically an admin to solution architecting, managing projects, to yeah, being a manager and responsible for people. And yeah, the first contact actually with EA as a method was, I guess, somehow around 15 years ago. And I was fascinated by the holistic approach. And since I'm myself very structured, I like methods, and I like to sort things and put it into different buckets. And that's why I was fascinated by the approaches. And it actually gave me the feedback. So what I implement and operate has a purpose and a value, and how to align what I do to what is the outcome on the other hand. And yeah, so I kept an eye on that, and did TOGAF certifications and make use of the methods in my daily work. And yeah, so now we're here today.
And then one interesting thing there as well, like how was that? And this is just because I'm interested in, like, how was that transition for you when you went from developing machines in a way to developing people, and you start to get people responsibility as well. Like, how was that for you when you're used to working with machines, technology, and now you're also working with people? How was that?
That's totally different.
Yeah.
Since machines are running on zeros and ones, people are not. And so I also had to develop myself in taking care of people, taking care of feelings, and ask for reasons behind, and engage people and all stuff of that. So that's a whole different thing, and I learned it through running projects at first step. So managing stakeholders and their interests and their engagement in certain topics. And a whole different story is if you're disciplinary, the one that has to take care of the development path of people and to fit in certain roles. And but that's also something that needs to be covered in EA as well, since skill and roles and functions are very important too.
Yeah. And the reason for that question, right, which I think is actually quite fascinating, is over the last 10, 15 years as well, right, you see more and more organizations now, like resource planning. You see a lot of company turnover, especially after the pandemic as well. You have people leaving the organizations, and very often they bring all their expertise and domain knowledge with them, right? And also, of course, looking at a lot of people that have been in an organization for 20, built up a lot of expertise, knowledge. You look at the workforce today, where the millennials and the people younger than myself as well, they stay with an organization for 2 years, which is kind of a lifetime for them, and then they go on to the next journey. So how do you see kind of architecture as a concept, like have changed over the last years, 10, 15 years, thinking about the people aspect, and going just from being an enabler to business?
I would say that's because of the roots of architecture, because all the methods were developed from a technical point of view. So align technology to business. And I guess in the beginning, I don't remember that because I stepped in too late for that. I guess the whole concept was developed in the mid 80s, I guess, in the early 90s or something.
Yep.
And there was no business domain in it. So it was totally technical. And when I stepped in 15 years ago, it still has that view. And it was still focused on, standardize, rationalize, and basically decrease costs and get cost efficiency and gain operational quality. That's what's the main focus. And now what we're seeing, or what I see, is it's totally different, because it's creating value and telling companies where to invest and where not to invest, and if invest, how to do it. And that's a much more business focus. And the aim is not anymore to document for the sake of the documentation or for the operational quality. It's more the focus on the business and equalization of flight levels, and use information to make valuable decisions. And that's somehow a little bit less informations that need to be covered within an architectural process or development method, but it more focused on what kind of information is required by which stakeholder, and what is his point of view, and how can he decide actually.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned in the notes before today's kind of interview as well, which I really like, right? From business IT alignment to technology enables business, right? And every organization is kind of a technology business today, right? They use technology in some sort, and then going from kind of being a cost center to actually being that enabler, right? So it's not just like keeping the lights on anymore. It's how do we successfully change, which is kind of brings us to that aligning strategy and execution. And from your experience, to the enterprise architects that are kind of listening to this episode today, or organizations that are looking to mature and build a practice, or even the CIOs that don't really have any experience with enterprise architecture, but they're kind of starting to think in those terms. Like, what would you say are like the biggest kind of mistakes or things that they should be aware of, or kind of the starting point? Like, how does all this begin?
Yeah, I would say start small because do not try to focus on a whole method. So, for example, use TOGAF or Zachman and take it all out of it. Take the whole ADM, all the deliverables, all the viewpoints, and everything, because that's not the outcome. Because the outcome should be what's valuable. So take what you need. There are some basic steps in all the frameworks that need to be covered, because that helps to have a structure and know what's in the beginning, what's the next, so you know the steps. But take out of the methods what you need and gather the information that you need to decide, basically. So don't be too academic and dogmatic with the methods. And also the documentation. Yeah, it's right that for operational needs, you need certain documentations, but that's different to architecture decisions. So, focus on what your stakeholder needs and what are their concerns and what flight level they actually have, because that's totally different. So business stakeholders usually know what they are doing and what they want to do in a function or process or capability perspective. And even that discussion from an IT perspective is totally different. And IT people usually know their infrastructure, they know their applications, and how to leverage potentials there. And just basically, use, actually, I repeat myself, use what you need and what gains value.
Yeah. One thing I often see when I speak to architects as well, and then also more and more senior IT leaders, is you mentioned it, and I think it's quite interesting, right? Sometimes they can be very focused on the method in itself, like that is kind of the end goal. But in reality, right, it's about what is the business organization actually trying to accomplish, and kind of that's the starting point to create that alignment. So what do you think is, for, let's say, a C-level executive today, like, why should they start thinking in this way? Just start thinking about not necessarily the concept of enterprise architecture as TOGAF and SACMAN and Archimate and all those type of things, but more like, why is this approach so important for executives today?
Because it covers the whole enterprise, basically, and it covers all the questions that comes along if you are dealing with uncertainty or dealing with changing something. So we are using that methods from our company perspective and our consulting approaches in a lot of different areas. So for example, with the capabilities, we use it for IT transformations. We also use it within cloud competence center discussions. So to get a structure, to get an idea where our customers and what are the next steps from a maturity perspective. So that's the easy start point. And the same thing you can use on the data perspective and also on the application landscape topic. You can use that basic structures.
Yeah. And then I see we have some questions from the audience here. I just want to make sure we cover some of them on the way. So let's see, the first question that we got in here, right, is from Marcus Morba. So a major pain point, nobody has an idea about accessibility. So kind of software, ICT, ergonomics, high quality, and when they get aware, is always too late. HTML should be a foundation and known by anyone involved in web-based software product. What are your thoughts on that? That's a very interesting point. I think, Marcus, could you elaborate in the comment section if we need some more context there?
I guess I got the point of the question actually, because accessibility is a kind of a metric of an application. So you can rate it if an application is good or not, or accessible or not accessible. So somehow in the business fit area, and this actually can be rated and can be used for future decisions. Yeah. So it's a valuable information if you want to rationalize your portfolio. So see what capabilities are supported by which applications, and then do ratings on which applications fit the business and which not, basically, and where you have duplicates and where not, and where you don't have applications. And then you can use that metrics for further decisions. But it's always about normalization for that metric. So you need to align with the business what is behind the accessibility actually. So for example, here the Marcus actually raised the question. Ergonomics is, yeah, somehow, if you ask me for ergonomics, I have a different opinion than you might have, Henrik. So that needs to be, yeah, aligned somehow.
Yeah. And I think a lot of organizations are using, there's many methods you can use here as well, but kind of Gartner's time model is kind of one thing to do, right? You're looking at what's the overall criticality of our applications, how well are they scoring with our strategic initiatives, and kind of doing calculations based on that. But I agree, right? Because if you ask a lot of people, in the organization to share their subjective opinion of how important an application is, from experience, I know that, of course, all the applications that they're responsible for are the most important ones. Yeah. So you have to kind of make sure you create that foundation of how we're actually scoring applications as well. But I think that's a great question, because it is also, at the end of the day, kind of creating some clear KPIs on how we're going to measure the value of our IT estate as well, right? And how well it's supporting the business. But thanks for helping me understand that question as well, Robert. Another question is, how is it your mandate changing in the latest year? Strategic planning is more and more volatile, and waterfall modeling of enterprise architecture seems to have become biased and not being taken in consideration as it was before. Following the cultural change of enterprises, do you experience the same change? Unfortunately, because of governance, I can't see who wrote that question. It just says LinkedIn user. Hopefully that is not your name. But what's your thoughts on that, Robert?
I guess that's the question behind it, is the change from projects to products, basically, and change in organizations. And yes, I see the same thing. I've been on stage last year regarding that topic, and yes, it's actually the case that there is some bias. I totally agree on that, because traditionally, when you run through an architectural initiative, you do all the designing and planning in advance, and then you do the implementation and do the governance and check if there's differences and stuff like that. So if you do it on a product base, you have to adapt, and all the frameworks, they have adapted that as well. So there is options to use EA methods in product organizations, and to do the right designing in the right depth on the different levels, basically. And it can be done. And basically there you need to focus on what you need in which step. So what you need on enterprise level, if you do the strategic directions, so decide about your portfolio, basically. And on the portfolio basis, you decide what is in the products. So what do you need from the different product teams? And then the product teams do the really groundwork. And you basically run through different processes with different informations. And you need more, I would say, architectural expertise from the different levels. So on high level, you need really an oversight. And on the deeper level, you really need deep knowledge, for example, in technology. And to gain the autarky of the teams, you need principles, and you need trust, and you need basically the knowledge, and you need skilled architects that are able to interpret the principles, and they know the guidelines and know how to decide themselves in their product context. So you can use the methods, and it is possible, but yeah, I know the biases.
Yep. And also I know another thing here as well, and this is more like, if you look at strategy, look at execution, look at project management as well, like just on the side here, like where do you see kind of an enterprise architecture function fit in with the PMO function, like a project management office? Like how do you see those two working together?
Very very close, actually. Because basically projects or products are the places where change occur. So there is the background, the scope, what needs to be done, and how much money and constraints do you have, and when should it be ready, and then you can start doing the architecture work. Either if you're running a product and you constantly develop the product until the product is de-launched, or you have a project where you do all the planning in advance and implement, and then you close it down and you're finished. So basically, that needs to be integrated very strong.
Mm-hmm. And then on the separate note here as well, I see we have a question, like, the first one was basically in terms of certifications, which one would be the best? TOGAF question mark. I know there's a lot of certifications depending on the use case for these, right? And then I think we had a good comment from Mark Thomas. He's also been on the interview series before. For the ones that haven't watched that interview, I would highly recommend that with Mark. How to create a successful transformation roadmap as well. It's been a really good episode. But in your experience, Robert, like what are the certifications that enterprise architects need to have in mind? If it's thinking more strategically, if it's kind of connecting IT to business, like what is your experience?
Since I'm only certified with TOGAF, I can recommend that. And but also the advice, it's a toolbox, and it's a really huge toolbox. So it gives you all the stuff you might need, but in the reality, you just operate little abstracts of TOGAF. So this is quite the full range you can cover, and it's complete, I guess. So from my perspective, I don't need anything else. But when it comes to special cases, we had the agility topic with products. SAFe is a good approach, but it's the same story. SAFe is another huge toolbox. So SAFe for architects is quite valuable. If you are in an IT organization and you need to establish capabilities and functions there, IT for IT is a nice method. And also from the project management perspective, PMI or Scrum are valuable. So it's depends on the personal manner and what you need for your daily work, what tools may help you.
Yep. So moving on, I know we have a lot of questions here, but moving on with the agenda then. So one of the things that also actually speaks to one of the questions that just came up here as well, but in larger corporations, right? So in your previous organization as well, when you work with steel, how does enterprise architecture function in bigger organizations, and how is that difference, right? Because if you're in a small organization that can move faster, there's less kind of politics, office politics. It can move faster, but in bigger organizations, there's more kind of chefs in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So how does that work?
There is no recipe how that is going to work, but what's actually come down, what's the difference between mid-size and small and large corporates? Actually, it's the size of the people, basically, and the organizational structure that is more complex. So, and you need to adapt that to your enterprise architecture capability as well. So you need to have more architects, basically, and you need to structure them in the different domains, basically, and integrate it into the organizational structure and align them together, either with processes, or you do it with a separate organizational arm in the structure, and but they need to talk the same language. They need to use the same information. So basically, use the same repository if valuable, and use the same method. So if you have a method that you selected, you adapt that to the company's needs, and they need to have the same style of work somehow and the same language so that they can communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things here that actually that Melis Oskur Satkaya is actually mentioning, like, do you think to have EA as a whole, or segregated, if you will, like within the different departments, and they should define their own ways of working, like their own enterprise scope? But because in some organizations you have enterprise architects that sit at the group level, and then within the different business units or departments you might have architects that work within the different product lines. But do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know it's a big question, but how do you create that alignment from within the individual parts to kind of the overall scope of the organization?
It depends. If you have a corporate that is that needs to have quick decisions and needs to be really fast in what they are doing, and they need more resources, and they need more architects as well that are aligned to the different line of business. So you can integrate architecture teams with the line of business, and you have more lines of business with all the different teams. So you have the same roles in different lines, basically, and they are doing different things. What should be covered, they should work the same way, as I mentioned earlier, and they should use the same principles and methods to have a kind of alignment, because on the top of the corporate, there is somehow a small group of people that are doing the decisions. So the lines should walk somehow in the same way. If you don't need that velocity, you can have a central function, or you can have a mixture of both. There are three different approaches. You can mix the approaches. It actually depends on the enterprise needs.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things here as well that I kind of prepared for today is kind of to successfully use enterprise architecture to align strategy and execution, you need to think about the stakeholders. Kind of you're selling internally, right? You're selling to executives in the things that they're interested in, and the things that they need, the insights that they need to have. You're selling to the solution architects if it's more on the technical side, like the product owners, the project managers. And so if you have an EA function that have been struggling, or let's say architecture has been struggling to get the reputation that it deserves in an organization, and you have executives that have been, maybe been burned before, trying to implement an EA tool, or if there's an EA team, whatever it might be. What would you tell those architects in order for them to kind of try to get that support and buy-in from their executives again to invest in building this capability?
I'm
asking you a lot of big rhetorical questions here today. I'm sorry for that.
Actually, you need to convince your leaders, and they need to understand what the magic is behind and what the value you can gain with it, basically. And it's quite easy if your leaders know what the potential is. If not, you need to educate, basically. You need to explain why and what are the values are. And as I mentioned earlier, start small to basically be able to reach goals and show for example, what KPIs you reached in that small area. And on the other hand, make it a business topic, because that's what it should be and what it is. Then since half of the domains are more business focused than technical focused, the business should be in the mix and should be convinced as well, and should be engaged. And when this is done, it's easier, because the business basically is where the value comes from, or where the value should be gained. And then you can convince your leadership more easier, I guess.
Yeah. Why do you think, like, why do we need to have executives involved in the enterprise architecture practice? It's a, I feel like it's, it's a little bit kind of a leading question, like a stupid question, but like, why, why do we need to get executives to buy into this to succeed with an EA practice?
It's simply because of the holistic approach. It covers too much of an enterprise that you can cook it on a small in a small kitchen. That doesn't work out. So it's somehow, I would advise, top down would be the better approach than bottom up from very, very small. So yeah.
Yeah. So basically, working on that analogy, right? So you need to have more chefs in the kitchen, but you really need to make sure that they have different domains that they're responsible for. Someone are making the starters, someone making the dessert, some are fixing the wine. I
Yeah.
think that is a good way to good way to describe it. So kind of Mark has a question here as well. Is how have you dealt with the EA is just sitting in an ivory tower? To really show how the EA function adds value. And you mentioned some of it now, but like the ivory tower question, right? It's it's been there ever, like since I started working with organizations as well. Ivory tower, being isolated, segregated documentation, silo ways of working. Everybody knows these things, but what are your thoughts on that?
I break it down. go
Yeah.
go out to the business, be open, and yeah, maybe strip down what you created in that tower, and start from the beginning, or start to reflect what did you really need to decide, and what helped and what not, what attributes in your repository are necessary and which not, and which diagrams or matrices are helpful and which not, and basically, yeah, strip it down to what helps, and yeah, gain velocity, gain value.
Mhm. Perfect. And also kind of just to summarize on that as well, right? So in order to successfully use EA to align strategy and execution, you need to meet your stakeholders where they are. You need to know the different personas that you're selling to internally. You need to always start with the high level initiatives, objectives, and start from the top and down to the bottom. And then making sure that you have the executive support. You need to kind of educate them to see the value and what's in it for them. Um, what would you say are some of the kind of key resources that you have used yourself, if that's kind of books, if it's kind of courses you're taking? You mentioned certification there with TOGAF. Like, what are some of the things that has been useful to you?
In the really early steps, it's been the book is Strategic Management of the IT Landscape. Actually, it's a German book, Strategisches Management der IT-Landschaft. It's
Can you
from
say that again just so I can learn? What was the name in German? Just trying to learn some German here now.
Management der IT-Landschaft. There has
Yeah.
been newer releases, and it's constantly updated, I guess. That's quite good. On the other hand, I use the Open Group library quite a lot, since it's it's a worldwide initiative that is creating the content and updating it, and there's a lot of releases. Also, besides TOGAF, they have different other stuff. They worked quite a lot of the agility in the agility topic as well. They recently released something about security architecture. I personally would say that should be a separate domain in enterprise architecture, because it's getting more and more impact. And the third one is a total different aspect, but one of my colleagues released a book as well. That's the Digital Transformation Payday. That's quite interesting, since a lot of digitalization initiatives are not paying out, and
No.
they did a lot of research on that. And I had a chat with him as well internally, and yeah, we agreed that enterprise architecture as a method could avoid and could help to to reach that payday, and to know where to invest and where not, and if you invest, um, how and what to do, basically. And
Awesome. And we will also leave those kind of resources in the comment section after today's episode as well. And I also genuinely believe this as well. Is like, I think enterprise architecture, done right, focusing on the business objectives and outputs. I don't think that there's been a time where that has been more important than it has been now, because you see a lot of organizations that have a lot of technology depth, right? They have a lot of, some of them are also in highly regulated industries. So just the kind of the assets of having a strong governance and making sure that you actually understand how your organization work, where do you have weaknesses, how is your data put together, where do you have sensitivity, like all of those type of things, just from a governance perspective, I think is so important. But then also, like, how do you lead change? Some organizations we ask as well, like, what, do you know what will happen if one of your systems go down? And they can have a philosophical discussion around, I believe this will happen, but you never know, right? And you see more and more organizations now as well, like many organizations being hit by cyber attacks, right? And they can't really plan for that because they don't understand how their IT is supporting the business. So I think I definitely agree with you. Using enterprise architecture is both extremely valuable from a governance perspective,
You
but also change.
you have all the information there. So if you cover, for example, the data domain and you classify your data objects regarding their information security needs, you can take measures, and the measures should be evaluated then from a technical perspective and also from an application perspective. And you can sum that up in the security architecture part and see what measures are adequate for the risks that you are seeing on the data objects. And you can use matrices to decide, basically.
Yeah. So I see we have a couple of kind of remaining questions there as well. I see that both Mark and Marcus are sharing some valuable resources as well, which is great. And we have a comment from Andreas here as well, which I like. You simply need the architecture elevator to leave the tower, which is good.
We have one about KPIs. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, let's start with that one.
Yes, I would say you can simply easy start with what technical risks have been mitigated. So where do you have risks in your landscape, where you have end of life systems or end of support or something like that, which have been mitigated in the past area, for example. Where did you increase technical fit for capabilities? Or on the other hand, we had the accessibility question. Where did you raise business fit, for example? Or where do you have what is your reuse ratio of applications, for example? Or how many apps have been rationalized in a certain amount of time? Where did you increase business value for capabilities? That's somehow in the business fit area. But you can also see that as where did you have capabilities that didn't have any applications mapped to it. For example, when you want to digitize something, then you find your answer there. Also, if you add the strategic differentiation to capabilities, you can leverage the potentials there. Where do you have custom applications for commodity capabilities, for example? You can switch over to standard commercial off-the-shelf applications and see how the operating and investment costs are changing, for example. So that's a variety of different KPIs that can help from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think one of the goals here as well, right, is also to make that shift from making this like an annual exercise, right, to kind of do this on an ongoing basis, to make this kind of a strong governance that it is there as well, and those KPIs can be measured, not just kind of once a year when you're going to do an application rationalization, and then you spend 2 months actually gathering the information, and then it's outdated the moment you start the project, but kind of running this on an ongoing basis. And then you mentioned some of the business capabilities there as well as one of the capability or KPIs. And I think that's a good kind of transition into Anita's question here, where it's kind of how do you differentiate business architects from enterprise architects?
Enterprise architects basically cover all domains, or should cover all domains. And business architects cover the business domain. So they should focus on the capabilities, on the process, on the user groups, on the organizational structure behind it. What locations do you have? And and have all that in their toolbox actually.
Awesome. And Anita, if you have any follow-up questions on that as well, feel free to write them in the chat. But this is what, I really like this format of Behind the Future, because I think it's quite engaging. It's fun for me as well. I always learn a lot. I think it's quite engaging to kind of have a conversation with you as well, Robert, but then also seeing, people actually chipping in with their questions and their reflections and perspectives. I think, this is the best way that, or what I'm also trying to do and what I want to do is kind of try to facilitate these forums, if you will, where people can learn from each other and they can share experiences. Because I think at the end of the day, very often, you hear about all the different things that organizations are doing, but sometimes it's difficult to find that information, especially within enterprise architecture, or kind of using enterprise architecture for change. So being able to sit here today and share that, I think is great. And I see people are having a discussion here in the comment section. Let's hope they behave so that we don't get a war after today's interview. But I really like that people are engaging here, and also same to you, Robert. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and perspectives on this. How has it been to join the episode today?
Very good. I love to share my experiences, and that's what what my job basically is, to adapt and to find ways to solve problems basically. And what is more valuable than sharing what you've seen already, and what experience did you gain, and what worked out and what didn't work out, and somehow what situation did you see before and how did you react? The same as the questions that has been asked, either the KPI question or the product and project questions. That's basically what everybody comes around with in the modern area of EA. And you are much quicker if you join such formats. Even in our chat, there are always new impulses that you can use for future. And yeah, so it's really good, really nice.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that you will leave the audience with today before we wrap it up, like what's after all the things we talked about today, the German expression of the book, which I will work on, of course, after we wrap up the episode. But what is one takeaway you want to leave the audience with today based on what we talked about?
Since this is quite a complex topic, don't give up, basically, and don't struggle actually, with doing too much. It's start small, start where you see you can gain benefits, and constantly develop. That's I would say that's the best advice, and be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, fantastic, Robert. I really like that one. And then also for the ones that are still here, we also have kind of a use case guide as well, if you will, on kind of what we're seeing with organizations in regards to aligning strategy and execution. So if you have camera, you can use the QR code and you will be sent there. But Robert, really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today. It's been great. It's great to hear that it's been valuable for the audience as well. And with over 615 people signing up for this event, I think that we were able to control our nerves. And next time we will do it in German.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye. Let's see.